All right, guys, we're back for part 2 of episode 52. And on this part of the episode, we're going to be breaking down the top 15 fighters in the UFC's 155-pound lightweight division, who I feel they should fight next, who makes sense, and what fights we're most likely to see. So without any further ado, let's get this started. I don't know why I decided to do the intro on the second part of the episode. It's still the same episode, right? But either way, we covered on the first part that the UFC Fight Night in Auckland, New Zealand on Sunday, February 23rd is more than likely 100% going to be main evented by Dan the Hangman Hooker. He was coming off a good win over Ally Quinta at UFC 243 in the co-main event, and it's looking like he's going to main event this card in a 5-round fight. And Hooker was, Quinta was ranked 6th, I'm pretty sure, and Hooker beat him. So now Hooker is ranked number 7, and it's really tough to figure out who Hooker's going to face when you really take everything into account. But let's figure out what fight we're most likely to see first. So first off, we're going to do the Khabib fight. Obviously, Khabib is the lightweight champion. He's 28-0, coming off of 2 back-to-back wins, one over Conor McGregor at UFC 229 and one over Dustin the Diamond Poirier, the former interim lightweight champion at UFC 242. Yeah, UFC 242. So Khabib is more than likely going to be fighting Tony Ferguson. This fight has been booked, I believe, like 4 or 5 times already, and it hasn't happened. Whether it was Ferguson pulling out or Khabib pulling out due to an injury, Khabib not being able to make weight, Ferguson getting injured, Ferguson not being able to fight because he was injured. Just a fight that every MMA fan has wanted to see for I don't know how long, probably 4 years. I would say about 3 or 4 years we've been wanting to see this fight. More recently in the last 2 years. I would say it was at an all-time high during UFC 223, and then the day before the event, or 2 days before the event, Ferguson had to pull out because he tripped over some cable wires outside during an interview and ripped his knee. But Ferguson came back at UFC 238 and defeated Donald Cowboy Cerrone via doctor stoppage, second round TKO. So good win for Tony Ferguson there. And then obviously Cerrone lost to Justin Gaethje via a first-round knockout after that. So 2 back-to-back losses for Donald Cerrone, not looking so good, but I believe he's going to get a huge fight next. But here's what I would book. So let's figure this out real quick. So first off, like I said, we've got Khabib versus Tony Ferguson. That's probably going to happen in March or April of 2020. I expect it to happen. Fingers crossed everything goes well and the fight does actually pan out and happen. But, who knows? You never know, especially with a fight that's been this cursed, so to speak, with it being booked about 5 or 6 times and not happening. This is a fight everybody wants to see. Everybody thinks that Tony Ferguson is going to be the toughest matchup for Khabib Nurmagomedov, for Khabib, just because of his great jiu-jitsu and his rubber guard and his elbows from the bottom and just his guard game. They think it's going to give Khabib a lot of trouble and make it hard for him to pass the guard and land some ground and pound. I'm a little more confident that Khabib can beat Tony Ferguson now after his back-to-back wins over McGregor and Dustin Poirier, which I picked against him in both those fights. But I'm more confident that Khabib can win, but I still think Tony Ferguson has a shot of catching him in a submission or just battering him up from the bottom with elbows while Khabib's in Tony's guard. So we knocked off the number 1 ranked in the champion. Number 2 ranked is Dustin the Diamond Poirier. He's been posting on Twitter that he wants to come back in March. And, it's really tough to figure out who he's going to fight. He's been clamoring for a fight against Conor McGregor, and I think it could happen. But Conor McGregor is supposed to come back on January 18th, 2020. That's supposed to be his return fight. That's what they've been working on. Dana White said there's no plan, and that's not 100% in stone. That's what they're looking at, but it's not set yet. But to be honest, I think Conor's going to come back at this fight card. And who I think he should fight, I believe Conor McGregor should fight Justin the Highlight Gaethje. I think McGregor versus Gaethje is probably the best fight you could make in the lightweight division aside from the championship fight between Khabib and Tony. And if Tony Ferguson doesn't get the title shot, you got to give it to a guy like Justin Gaethje, because Gaethje's coming off 3 back-to-back wins, a knockout over James Vick, a knockout over Edson Barboza, and a knockout over Donald Cerrone, all in the first round. And you got to give him a good fight. And I think he's done enough to get a title shot or fight Tony Ferguson. If Tony doesn't get the fight and they somehow want to give McGregor another fight at Khabib, but I don't see that happening. I think that, like I said, Khabib and Tony Ferguson will be fighting in early next year, or at least be booked to fight. Cross our fingers that it actually, all pans out and goes to plan and he gets the fight. But let's see. So number 2 ranked is Dustin Poirier. Number 3 ranked Conor McGregor. Number 4 ranked Justin Gaethje. Number 5, Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Number 6, Paul Felder. Number 7, Dan the Hangman Hooker. Number 8, Kevin Lee. Number 9, Ally Quinta. Number 10, Edson Barboza. 11, Anthony Pettis. 12, Gregor Gillespie. 13, Charles Oliveira. 14, Alexander Hernandez. And 15, Islam Makhachev. I'm going to take Pettis out of the rankings. I think Pettis is going to finish out his career at 170 pounds. I think there's a lot of good fights he could have at 155, but I think he's going to want to fight at 170 pounds and try to make the jump up like Cowboy Cerrone did. So let's see. With Conor, let's get the Conor McGregor fight out of the way. Just for what I think should happen and what I think could happen, but it's going to be hard to see Conor McGregor taking this fight. I'm going to book Conor McGregor and Justin Gaethje. I think that's probably the best fight you could give Conor McGregor, not in terms of easiness or fanfare or anything like that, but it's the most exciting fight you could give McGregor at the current point. And it's an opponent which it has so many different things in his game that it would be just an amazing fight to see. McGregor versus Gaethje is the way to go. So I'm going to say that fight gets booked on January 18th. Conor McGregor versus Justin, the highlight, Gaethje. So we knocked out Tony Ferguson, we knocked out Conor, we knocked out Gaethje. We've still got Poirier ranked at number 2. We've got Cerrone ranked at 5. Paul Felder ranked at 6. Hooker ranked at 7. Kevin Lee 8. Quinta 9. And Barboza 10. Let's do the Hooker fight. So Dan Hooker's currently ranked number 7. If he's going to get a main event fight, I'm going to give him... tough fight to pick because I got to figure out who I want Poirier to fight. But let's give Dan Hooker... You know what? Let's do it. Let's do Dan Hooker versus Paul Felder. I think it's a big enough fight, obviously, since Felder beat Edson Barboza at UFC 242. I think this is a big enough fight to give Dan Hooker. I honestly think the best fight you could make for Hooker is Dustin the Diamond Poirier. I think Dan Hooker versus Dustin the Diamond Poirier at UFC 243 or at the UFC Fight Night in Auckland, New Zealand would have been the perfect fight. I think that it would be a good chance for Dustin Poirier to get back in the winning column and get a good fight and put himself right back up into title contention. It's a tough fight for Dan Hooker, and it's a tough fight for Poirier. So that's why I'm gonna give Dan Hooker Paul Felder. So Felder's ranked 6, Hooker's ranked 7. It just kind of makes sense at this point. For Dustin Poirier, we're gonna give Poirier Donald Cerrone. That's a fight that could have happened back in the day. It's a really good fight. Cerrone obviously coming off 2 losses. Poirier lost to Khabib. So they're both coming off losses. I think it could definitely work out in Poirier's favor. I really like the fight for Poirier, but I like the fight for Donald Cerrone too. I think Cerrone has a better ground game than Dustin Poirier, and I think that on the feet they'd be well matched. I think that Poirier is definitely the better boxer and probably the better he has more power and stuff like that, but Donald Cerrone probably has the better kicks, Muay Thai, and clinch game. So it would just be a good fight. So I'm going to say let's do the number 2 ranked Dustin Poirier versus the number 5 ranked Donald Cerrone, and we'll do that in March on a pay-per-view. Maybe UFC 247, 248, whatever that card is coming up. Let's do that. I like that fight. So Poirier versus Cerrone. Up next, we've got 8 ranked Kevin Lee. We've got 9 Quinta, 10 Barboza, 11 Anthony Pettis. I'm crossing Pettis off the rankings. So we'll say 11 Gregor Gillespie, 12 Charles Oliveira, 13 Alexander Hernandez, and 15 Islam Makhachev. Let's do a fight for. Let's do Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee obviously coming off, getting back in the win column with that huge first-round head kick knockout over Gregor Gillespie, and he's looking at a good fight next. He vaulted himself right back up into contention with that number 8 ranking, and it's tough to figure out who I would give him in terms of an opponent. I know he's been talking about Islam Makhachev and that they've been saying that they wanted the fight, and then Kevin Lee's like, well, no, I just beat Gregor Gillespie. I deserve a bigger fight and stuff like that. You can't give him Quinta because he lost to Quinta, who was ranked 9. You can't give him Barboza because he already beat Edson Barboza. The Gregor Gillespie coming off a knockout. I think that Kevin Lee's in a tough spot. I think Dan Hooker and Kevin Lee is a great fight. I think that it definitely could be made for the main event. You know what? I'm actually going to change my mind here. I'm going to do, so at first I said Dan Hooker versus Paul Felder, which would be the number 6 versus number 7 guy. I'm actually going to change it. We're going to take Felder out of the fight, and we're going to give Dan Hooker Kevin Lee. I think Dan Hooker versus Kevin Lee is a great matchup. What's Hooker ranked? The number 5 or the number 7 versus the number 8 ranked guy. It's just like the fight previously with Felder and Hooker. So I say let's make that Auckland, New Zealand main event Dan the Hangman Hooker versus the Motown Phenom Kevin Lee at lightweight, which was going to put Felder back in the discussion. Felder beat Edson Barboza. I say let's do Felder versus Quinta. Let's do the number 6 ranked Paul Felder versus the number 9 ranked Quinta. He's above Edson Barboza, so it's technically a jump up in rankings. I think Paul Felder could definitely get a top 5 ranked opponent next, but I say let's do Raging Quinta versus Paul Felder later on or early in 2020, maybe like the second pay-per-view of the year. Yeah, then that's number 9 versus number 6. It's both good in the rankings. Felder beats Barboza and then beats Quinta. He's right up in the top 5 at lightweight. He could get a top 5 guy right now, but I don't know if that's going to happen just because of how many top contenders they have in that division right now. For Edson Barboza, he's currently ranked number 10. I think that's tough. I think Barboza is going to get not a gimme fight because no fight in this division is a gimme. I say let's do Edson Barboza versus Charles Oliveira. I think that's a good fight. I think it moves Charles Oliveira up in the rankings. It gives him a tough matchup and shows if he can be up towards the upper echelon of the 155-pound division. And it's just a good fight all around. So let's do Edson Barboza versus Charles Dubronx Oliveira. Gregor Gillespie's ranked 12. I don't expect him to get another huge fight. I think he'll take a bump in the rankings. So let's do Gregor Gillespie versus Islam Makhachev. That was a fight that Kevin Lee said he wanted. I think that Gregor versus Islam, it would be 2 grapplers up against each other. It'd be the number 12 ranked versus the number 15 ranked guy in lightweight, and they'd have to fight to keep their spot in the top 15. I think Gillespie versus Makhachev is a great fight. I think Makhachev deserves a good fight since his win due to his win at UFC 242. And I think Gregor Gillespie, this is a good fight for him, and it's in his wheelhouse of the grappling exchanges, and I think he'd be able to beat Islam. I took Pettis out of the rankings, like I said. I just feel like he's more inclined to fight at 170. If you watch my previous episode where I booked the fights for the welterweight division, 170 pounds moving forward, I like one fight for him, especially at welterweight, and I think you guys would too. If you haven't looked at that episode, it's episode 51, which was the previous episode, part 2, and it's actually uploaded to YouTube currently. So if you want to see it, go out of your way and check that out. I think you guys would really enjoy it. For Alexander Hernandez, I have no idea. Honestly, it's a tough spot to be in, and he's coming off a few losses, I'm pretty sure. So let's do Alexander Hernandez versus who's another guy at 155 pounds that's not in the top 15 but could vault himself into the top 15. Let's see. Sorry guys, I just want to check something because I have a good fight in mind for Alexander Hernandez. Sorry. Okay, so Brad Riddell is in the lightweight division. Let's go crazy. Let's do Alexander Hernandez versus Brad Riddell. I know it's a big jump up in competition for a guy like Riddell who only has one fight under the UFC banner, but he looked really good in that fight. And I say let's push these guys. You pushed Adesanya, you pushed Alexander Volkanovski, you pushed Dan Hooker, and they've really been able to shine. So let's do the number 14 ranked Alexander Hernandez versus Brad Riddell in the lightweight division. Brad Quake Riddell. I think that's a great fight. It's another chance to get city kickboxing up on the map. It's a good fight for Brad Riddell. So let's do Alexander Hernandez versus Brad Riddell. All right, guys, let's just go over the matchups we made. We've got, for the top 15 in the division, we've got Khabib versus Tony Ferguson taking place in probably March or April of next year. We've got Conor McGregor versus Justin Gaethje for the January 2018, 2020 card in Conor McGregor's return. We've got Dan the Hangman Hooker versus Kevin Lee, which is a great fight for the Auckland, New Zealand card and definitely main event worthy. And this is just a huge fight, and I can't wait to see it if it does happen. We've got Dustin the Diamond Poirier, the number 2 ranked guy, versus the number 5 ranked Donald Cowboy Cerrone. I also think Poirier versus Kevin Lee is a great matchup, but I don't think they want to give that to Kevin Lee yet. But down the line, I could see Kevin Lee and Poirier fighting, and I'd be all for that for sure. So, Dustin Poirier versus Donald Cowboy Cerrone, number 2 versus number 5. We've got Paul, the Irish Dragon Felder versus Raging Al Iaquinta, the number 6 versus the number 9 ranked guy. We've got Edson Barboza, the number 10 ranked guy versus the number 13 ranked, I'm pretty sure. Versus the number 13 ranked Charles Du Bronx Oliveira. We've got the number 12 ranked Gregor Gillespie versus the number 15th ranked Islam Makhachev. And for last but certainly not least, we've got the 14th ranked Alexander Hernandez versus striking coach of City Kickboxing and star on the rise, Brad Quake Riddell. That's it, guys. I really like this booking for these fights. I think I've hit the nail right on the head in terms of booking the best possible matchups for the division currently as it stands. And I hope you guys enjoy. So that's going to be it for this episode. Like I said, if you like the podcast, please go out of your way to send this to your friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, coworkers, family members, fans of MMA that you know, any MMA fighters you might know. Get this out. Touch 'em Up has to grow due to the fan base as well. I can't do all the work. If you guys enjoy the content I'm putting out and you think that more people would enjoy it, definitely go out of your way to send it to your friends, family, anybody like that. And if you'd like to donate, we do accept donations. I believe there's monthly subscriptions, and you can donate via the link on my Anchor podcast page. I'm not expecting donations, but if you'd like to, it would help the podcast grow, and it would show that my work was appreciated, but you just listening and tuning in is more than enough. Obviously, I'm available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor Podcasts, Overcast, and a bunch of other platforms, Stitcher. Now we're making the transition over to YouTube. More episodes will be uploaded currently throughout the week. This episode should be going up on YouTube. So if you're listening to this on Spotify, Anchor, or Apple, they should be up on YouTube pretty soon. And yeah, guys, thank you for listening to this episode. I can't wait to keep this going. And hopefully we get some MMA fighters on in the future. I was in contact with one MMA fighter, and I'm looking to get in contact with other guys, somebody possibly from City Kickboxing. Nothing's in the works yet, but I'm hoping down the line we can get it to work, and my work can be showcased and shown to some of these guys that I cover on the podcast. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed. This has been episode 52, part 2 of the Touch 'em Up podcast. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out. Have a good night, everybody. All right?